Michael was wiser than all of us.
The Rubel Castle you see today was constructed by 1,000 hands, manifesting the dream of our founders, two men who came into their own at the start of the 1960s. Michael Clark Rubel and Glen Speer, who moved into the Alborn Rancho property in 1959 and collaborated on building. In 1974, Glen moved from the castle in Glendora to build his own castle in St. John, U.S. Virgin Islands. 50 years later, in 2024, Glen joined us on the property for a reunion and a celebration of the life of builder John McHann, and his spiritual connections are as vital as ever. After 20 years of society ownership, those who cherish this place are falling away through death or exhaustion. But we are still many and always seek harmony and consideration with those who manage it. This talk represents a day of hope for those who cherish and know Rubel Castle. We are fortunate to have Glen's attention as we grapple with the challenges of governing Castle project and visualizing a future.
We need everyone to kind of get together here and sit down.
Or else.
First, I want to just mention my experience since arriving here. And yesterday was so wonderful with Criswell and yeah, everyone here. And it was very emotional for me to greet people. And I've thought a lot about this. When I knew I was coming, I did think a lot about what I was going to talk about, but I had such a good tour with Susan, and I talked to her on the phone a couple days ago before I came, and through that I realized there was some stress on the farm, and that connected with me because I knew that was going to happen. I've often thought the farm survived on growth, and it became a community, and it just kept pushing forward until it stopped. And once a project like that stops, something has to keep the energy flowing. And I didn't see how that mechanism would work. And I do have my own project that's 44 years old, and I've done the same thing as Michael, pushed it forward hard every day. I still work every day. And in the beginning, I was the builder, the owner. I managed the junction, and today I'm just the janitor. And in some ways, that's what Michael had. I remember visiting him the last few times and how much effort it took him to keep this funny farm working. And I'm going to talk later about Michael, but the reality is Michael was a serious person. He was truly very organized. He worked very hard, and his magic was bringing people together to have a wonderful experience. So today we have some problems, and I want to talk about those, not now. I'm going to kind of go into my experience on the farm, but the last part of my talk is we need to talk about the future. Everybody here has a stake in the future of the farm. I didn't meet Michael till the day he moved on the farm. Skipper came and got me and said, "You want to help Michael move on the farm?" I'd kind of heard about Michael, but I'd never met him. So
it's
I,
not my fault.
yeah, it's your fault. So I said, sure. We were going to the observatory and move stuff to the packing house. That always sounded interesting too at my young age. And we went and loaded stuff on, I think, 3 cars, drove over here, and Michael was going to live in the box factory, but the staircase wasn't very good. So we ended up taking it all into the packing house, and some of it ended up in the second refrigerator, which became Michael's dwelling for many years. The second refrigerator is a sacred place. Anybody who's been on the farm a lot and spent time knew how important it was to be able to be in that room and converse with everybody. The magic of the farm has always been conversation. When we do big projects, it's always everybody having an opinion, Skipper most of all. But we all kind of get together and do figure out a solution, and then we start. And along the way, many people help make it happen. Because always when you're moving big things or doing big projects, there are glitches. And it was such a cooperative venture. And that was a wonderful thing about how the junction worked. But as I've heard people's comments today, I realize that they look at the farm and they see it through today's eyes. Today's eyes are so different than 65 years ago. 65 years ago, it was a different world. We lived in the happy times in the 50s and 60s. We were free to do many things with our lives. And that was actually a little bit of a problem because there were 4 people that I'm going to talk about. John McHann, Skipper, and myself were friends in high school. So we had been very close through all of the classes. We often had the same classes. We were all in pre-engineering. And then I met Michael. He went to a military academy school. So he had a different kind of education. And the thing about that is, as we move forward in time, we were 3 different kinds of people. And John moved forward smoothly. He had a plan, and his life plan was to get through, get educated, get a job. He got a wonderful education. He got a job, a very wonderful job. He worked at that. And so he was never part of the beginning of the farm, but interestingly enough, he became a very important part of the farm later. And I'll talk a little bit more about him later. Skipper and Michael and myself, we weren't ready to go out in the real world, and we didn't.
We never did grow up.
Well, that was part of the problem. Skipper did eventually go to school and have a career and do things. And but Michael and I was on the farm for 12 years off and on. And you have to understand, the first 9 years of the farm, not much happened here. I went to school. Michael went to Cal Poly. I was drafted during Vietnam, and Michael did go into the Marines. We've never understood how that happened, but it did. And
He almost ended up in Leavenworth.
yes, all right. So anyway, and Michael took his trip to Mexico with donkeys, and he did the season with the captain sailing the seas. Michael is a mystery. There's a lot of things we don't know about him. Maybe collectively, if we all talked for 50 hours, the stories would be told that may be sort of true, but I don't know. So the farm, after I came back from the military, a friend of mine who I met in the military got out 2 months later, and he came to the farm. And at that point, I wanted to go look for an old truck. And he and I jumped. I had a motorcycle, and we started going through orange groves. And we found the first motor that we got, the big round wheels. And we were both so enthralled with it. We came back and told Michael, and Michael went to see it with us, and he was excited too. And that was the first big adventure that took a crew to go get that. And there are drawings that my friend Phil Lohman, who was with me in the Army, did drawings, and he became actually the primary draftsman. He was a wonderful drawer for a big institution in Washington, D.C. all of his career. That was the beginning of gathering things and bringing them to the farm. At the same time, I got a truck, and the truck that's in the packing house, 29 Ford, Chevy. And the farm began to grow. But about that time, the flood happened in '69. And we had accumulated quite a few things. We were beginning to accumulate more people involved. And when the flood happened, we did save the farm with lots of help. Skipper was here, everybody was making sandbags and filling in front. After the flood, then we were kind of stalled. And it was the only time that Michael and I had a difference of opinion that wasn't solved. Um, he wanted to donate the land on two sides of the farm to the city, which they didn't own, so they could widen the road and they would put a wall in for him. I didn't feel that, I felt the wall would make us seem like a group that didn't want to be seen. And we always had open borders. People could see what we were doing and they knew it wasn't anything bad. But in the end, Michael was right. The walls actually did create a security for us. They are beautiful, and that gave us the room to move forward with other projects.
Well, I gave him the idea to do that,
Yeah,
out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah,
because he was getting-
well, I saw it a little differently in those days. I do feel if everyone's open and we have conversations, you can solve your problems. What happened, I went to the Virgin Islands and I worked there for 2.5 years. And I developed a lot of skills that I already had through many different experiences, but there I had enough ability to keep crews together, and the crews were wonderful. My Frank and when Skipper was asking me about the crews, they were wonderful people who had skills but no guidance, and that was one ability that I developed during my time there. And after 2.5 years, I'd built 4 or 5 houses and made a little bit of money, and I wanted to come back to the farm, which I did. Jim Lambert and I drove that 46 Ford truck, which I had restored in the Virgin Islands. It actually came from Glendora originally, and then went to the Virgin Islands, and I brought it back. What happened then is I wanted to have a career being a sculptor. So I looked around and we had these big beams, which we had gotten earlier from the freeway. And those were adventures that I remembered. They were still in the reservoir. And I asked Michael, could I use them? He said, well, John Cox had dibs on them. I said, well, I have a plan. What do you think? And he said, you can have them. And so it took me about 3 weeks to draw out the plan for the center structure. And I came out and started sawing wood and making plans for all the connectors, and asked Michael if he could go find me a big diameter pipe, which he did. He was getting more interested. After about 8 days of working solidly, Michael came out and rolled up his sleeves. And for 6 months, he and I worked 16 and 18 hours a day, and we got that structure up to the roof. And I do have pictures of some of that. Nobody was around, so there aren't really many records of that. But that was a monument for me and for Michael. He, as you know, he's just a mountain of a man when he's working, and he did a lot of the cutting. I will show you some pictures after this of what we were doing, and we did erect it. The first section we pulled up went up wonderfully. We pulled it with the Jeep with ropes everywhere. Unfortunately, after it got up there, we stand back looking at it really happy, and then pretty soon it went and fell down and picked the Jeep up.
It was a working project.
Yeah, so we did get it up, and at the end of 6 months, I had damaged my arm working on it, and I ran out of money because I put a lot of money into that project. And I told Michael I was going to go back to St. John and make some more money and then come back, but that didn't happen. But what did happen, that was such, and I hadn't done the outer layers. It was all designed and we made the plates for it, but Michael kept building it. And Michael's told me many times, in fact, I brought a letter he wrote me talking about how that was the beginning of him understanding you could do just about anything if you wanted to. And it is really what created the castle overall. And it was done with many hands. And it was really an organizational problem, which I'm sure many other people besides Michael helped. make that happen. Um, it, um, it's a little goofy and I probably would want it a little differently, but every time I came back, I was thrilled and so happy to see what he was doing. The important thing about this story is that neither Michael or I really had a goal that we wanted to pursue. And it was me going to the Virgin Islands that gave me my goal finally, where I felt I had an ability to do something. And Michael always had the ability. He just needed to be connected to something. And my feeling about Michael is there are a lot of myths about him, but more importantly, he was very smart. He was very focused, and he was really a good person. That when we met and used to talk early years when we weren't building things, we spent a lot of time in his room. He was very conservative. He was influenced by Papa Peck and Odo Stadi, and his grandpa. They were all very conservative men, and it made for great conversations between me and Dwayne, who were the liberals in the group, and the other people who were around. There weren't a lot of women in those days on the farm, which obviously I look back and realize that was a mistake, because in fact, today, the only people I really see doing a lot of work thinking about it are the women. And while Michael was the king, I think in the future, the castle's going to need a queen to manage it. So anyway, that is the story of the farm. There's so many stories. Actually, if we all sat here and told our stories, it would be a wonderful show and we'd all laugh and get very emotional. But now I need to talk about what the future holds. So when the farm started, it was the happy years. And if it was like this, 65 years later, it's kind of like this. The world is completely different. We are going to fail at some point. There's no doubt about it. When you look at all the empty buildings, when you know so many people really don't have reasonable jobs, at least in the 50s and 60s, all of our parents had jobs, made money, had a future. We all looked towards a future. When I went to Berkeley, it was $56 a semester. I got through school by probably only paying $400 of tuition, and the rest of it I had to earn money just to live there and do the class. Kids today have no opportunity for that. Everybody's in debt. People are going to be living in apartments. So that makes it hard to deal with this property. It makes it hard for me to deal with my property in the Virgin Islands. I have some of the same problems. I built and built and built until I didn't have any more room, and then I stopped. And once I stopped, that started getting me in trouble. And I would like to leave. The only difference, Mongoose Junction generates lots of income. The farm takes lots of cash to work. So the strategy is to figure out how we can do that. And in reality, there's no way to hire people to do all the work, because the skill level's gone away. The kind of work we have is obviously very challenging. And so there needs to be a plan, a program put together. This is a wonderful start. This describes the physical plant, what needs to be done. But there needs to be a story about why the farm is important. What meaning does it have today versus what meaning it had in the beginning? It didn't have to have a meaning. It just happened. It just happened, and it moved forward, and it just kept happening. But today, we have to go back and figure that story out so that it has meaning to people today.
Inspiration.
it needs to do something. I mean, I did follow a tour around today. I think we should start by actually formalizing what the tour is all about. Because as Skipper knows, and I talked to him earlier about that, the truth is so much better and funnier than the myths. The myths are excuses for what they're seeing, but there shouldn't be any excuses. They're seeing it for a reason. And it was not created by crazy people. We did have a plan. We didn't have any money, but it didn't matter in those days. We had, and we weren't repurposing material. That was what we needed. That's what we went and got. It was the real material. It wasn't repurposed. It was what we could build with. So you need to understand that. And it does have a meaning, because every day we did a project, and we did thousands of them, little ones and big ones, and ones out in the country, and ones in the middle of orange groves. And some of them took dynamite, and some of them took whatever. The bottom line is, we were just doing what we needed to do, and everybody left us alone, because the old equipment people didn't value at that point. And Michael always said he got permission, but who knows? He probably did in many cases. And in fact, many people like Carl Gunn and Lauren Ward totally contributed to who we were. They supported us when we got in trouble. And that's also part of the story, which needs to be told realistically, because it is wonderful. It's not funny. It's not chaotic. It happened because of who Michael was and what they saw on the farm. So by creating a real story and trying to point out why it's important today, all young people, we all live in a very authoritarian world. Just no way to say about it. We live under lots of authority. There's so many rules and regulations that we would never have gotten off the ground if in the beginning. But we can still, within those rules and regulations, get the farm working again. I did get inspired this morning. I came here earlier so I could read the book, and I walked around and I was in the tour. And as I looked around, I saw there was opportunity. There's so much clutter in the farm that things have collected that don't really have any meaning. And the first job would be to go through and just clean out all that stuff and do something with it. You could pile it up in one corner and put a sign on it. It was rejected from the farm. But, and I know the trouble is, you have to make all of these ideas form a pattern that you can take to somebody who's wealthy or through a grant and say, look, this is what we need to do, and this is how we're going to do it, and this is the stages we're going to work through. And it's going to take a paid manager, somebody who really does understand. It's going to take paid employees. There's no other way. But those people all need to be able to pull in volunteers. So it is still a volunteer effort, but people have to have a leader. Michael was the leader. He was the one that organized getting the rocks, getting the cement, mixing the cement, putting up the scaffolding. Lots of people helped, but without him driving that all the time, it would have never happened. And that has to happen again. There has to be a leader. And I think we're not building things anymore. We're putting the farm back in order, because Michael always kept it in order. He really did. I do feel bad. The last couple of times I was here visiting him while he was still healthy, I could see how much that was weighing on him. If me today would have been here, I would have understood it, because now I do understand it with my own project. I'm the one that's picking up the trash and doing the painting and doing all the stuff, because to hire somebody, I still have to be there with them all the time, because they don't have the skill levels and they're not motivated to work. And so, but with the right people guiding it, there can be motivation to come on the farm, because it is a magic place. I think it should have the ability to actually grow a little bit more. There are areas of the farms that are underutilized, and so as much, I love trees, I donate more money to trees than anybody in St. John. You need to cut down a lot of these trees. There's no other way around it. You'll never keep up with the maintenance that they'll create. And so there has to be a plan of leadership to focus on the things you need to do. And I mean, in some ways, I even saw that there's a business opportunity here. It is a magic place, and you're in the right environment. Glendora you should be able to find the money here. There's so much money I see floating around, but they won't give it to you unless there's a story and unless they get recognition on the farm, which I think the farm can last for a long time if you can figure out how to do that. So now, any questions?
I have a comment.
Okay,
I
he always does.
We've been very fortunate that an earthquake hasn't brought something down, because when that happens, the whole place is gonna be blocked up.
Well, it depends on what quite the earthquake. If it's one that goes up and down, we're probably safe. If one that goes sideways, maybe. But you know, Michael and I did talk a lot about that. We had worries in the beginning.
So did we.
Yes, so the bottom line is, yeah, that could happen. It's not the end of the image of the farm. And we all die sometime, and when we die, we're gone. But what we've left behind is still there. And even if it's a pile of rocks, it'll be interesting, I guarantee it.
Pile of rock in the middle of the reservoir.
Well,
things that are round don't fall
yeah,
down.
yeah, things that are around, all the I built 3 main buildings in St. John, all for two for Rockefeller and 1 for the park. They are round or semi-round. They're the only ones that didn't blow down out in the open. And if you push on any round building or even curved building, it locks itself on one side or the other. So, and that's main structure. It does need the beams at the bottom to be secured. Your biggest problem is water. It's my biggest problem with the junction, and I built it. I really know how to build it now, but I didn't know in the beginning. So, you know, for 20 years, I created problems. Then for 5 or 10 years, I solved some of those. It's only been the last few years that I'm trying to wind up and get everything that I didn't do the first or second or third time done. But
Why did you go to the Virgin Islands?
why did I go? Because of the flood, and because I didn't agree with the wall, and because I had an opportunity to go down there and build. It was that simple. I mean, things aren't really complicated. And Michael's and my relationship never faltered. I couldn't be who I am today without Michael. Certainly, and that's many people at this table have been influenced by him and by the farm. And you know, I value that so greatly. The thing I miss the most is we were all going to get old and be 84 and sit out there and drink wine and tell lies to each other. It'd feel good. And I miss that, you know, but I do love what happened yesterday. I mean, the people were here saw how emotional I was. I mean, I thought of some of the adventures we had and how much it made me laugh. And I had to laugh here. I couldn't even get through because we did have a lot of fun. And it was because Michael was pretty interesting. The time we went to study mushrooms and we went through this and we were writing notes, and we were from Cal Poly theoretically, and they were showing us all this stuff for half a day. And we got back to the car and we all just laughed because there was no way we were ever going to be able to do that. There was no way the farm could be that strict and so on. And so we were nervous during the whole thing, but we really did watch. I mean, we tried to grow 4 different crops before we had to break down the wall.
Lemon tree's doing well.
Yeah. Well,
Talking about inside the reservoir.
inside the reservoir. Well, we carried tin in there.
Yeah.
We carried dirt in there. We built that thing. We went down to a company, always in the Mercedes, because that was impressive,
Oh, yeah.
and got this plastic pipe that was new, the black plastic. and brought it back and we were gonna grow, I think eggplant that time.
Yeah.
And so Michael put all the plastic in and went down and poked holes in it. But, yeah, so I told yesterday, I didn't understand. Michael and Ted and I had nicknames and nobody knew the nicknames, did it? But don't you guys tell? Do you, any of you
Yeah,
know the
I'll think.
nicknames? Huh?
Well, I knew.
You knew, yeah, but,
Sorry.
okay, all right. Well,
He'll say 'em.
yeah, the nicknames were very appropriate and
Mhm.
we all, so it was Ted Shepherd that gave us nicknames. And his nickname was Nearly Poet, which is very appropriate. And Michael's nickname was Primitive Doer,
Primitive doer.
Primitive Doer. And my nickname was the Doubting Thingmaker. Because I made things and I always doubted when we had arguments. So there's great richness in the body of the farm and Criswell was here from almost the beginning as a very young person. Sue was such an important part, the first, and Brooke, the first women on the farm, and they really made a difference. I saw such a difference in Michael. He realized what a value they brought, because Sue is a person that takes care of us always. She's the one that's figuring out how to make it work better for us.
Mhm.
So, and Michael and I were never good about that. Michael was great about fixing food for us, and you all know how he did that.
Yeah.
So, so
And
it was good when he turned that over.
he made a pact with himself that he would place 1 cubic yard of concrete every day,
Yeah,
7 days a week for 20 years. And that's what it took to build this. I came over a number of times on a Sunday and he'd be out there with his mixer, finishing off a cubic yard for
that was his dream and that was his passion. That's my feeling today is that for young people especially, they're going into really difficult times. There's so many homeless people. Everybody's having lots of problems and they're unhappy. The adults, there are two groups in America and they're arguing with each other. They hate each other. That's no way to live. Small communities are the future. Only small communities have the ability to get together and everyone agree on a plan and move forward. And the farm is a good example of us every day having a project and getting it done. And at the end of the day, we look at it and we're happy. We worked hard, but we're happy. And in the future, people are going to have to figure out how to pick small things that they accomplished during the day so they can look at that and at least feel they are happy that moment that they got something done that was real. Because that's where we're going. I mean, we just can't go on like we are in America.
I think we need to come up with a way to make the farm. You know, it's been our inspiration, but how can we?
Well, it
Move
needs,
that
it needs,
inspiration
it needs, well, okay, there are lots of things to do and there's lots of work that are standard things like, well, I saw a buggy down there and it used to be beautiful and it's really deteriorated. So what you do is you go pull it out there, you take pictures of it, put it on the internet and say, does anybody know how to come and restore this? I'll bet you there's 50 people in America that can do that. And you say, if you'll come, we'll provide the material and we'll put you up in the caboose. And you can stay here and fix it. And we'll have good times together because it's always good times on the farm. Okay, so you get that fixed. So you go to the next thing and you take it out. Cars are easy. There's lots of enthusiasts that would like to come and work on them, but you have to have a manager, somebody that will organize that, make it happen, make sure they got the parts,
Provide
make sure,
materials, provide.
right, all of that. So there are many things to fix that tank. In the Virgin Islands, we do have a really good program for young people. It was started by somebody who was rich and he did a great job. He built a shop. They bring them in, they teach them how to use tools and so on. And then they've gotten so good that they make things for businesses and many businesses buy their restaurant tables and even chairs from them. They do a great job. So you can take a picture of that and say, does anybody know how to build a hoop wooden? And that's easy. I mean, I can do that. It just takes some tools. The hardware is there. You get it down on the ground. You get somebody to come in here and build it. Or you learn how within your own group. I do have a manager at Mongoose that manages 1 and 2. I still do all the work on my side, but we have finally realized that in today's world, we have to hire a full-time maintenance person, somebody who can do basic electricity, plumbing, woodworking, painting. In other words, be able to take care of the daily maintenance we need. And we're gonna pay them a big salary and provide housing for them. You know, it'll probably be $100,000 job a year on St. John and housing. But we need it because to hire somebody to do an electrical job, we're paying $150 an hour and they're not really qualified very well. And, you know, plumbers are not only expensive, but almost not available. So if you have an emergency, you've got a problem. We're at the tip edge of failure of the ability to do things on St. John because of the cost.
When you have a resource problem because your resources are on the next island.
Well, yeah, it's really it's a management problem. It's a management problem. Obviously in America, it's an education problem. Children aren't being educated well enough. And actually, if I had a son that was gonna go into higher education, I'd tell him to take the trades because the trades are gonna be making more money than anybody soon. Because you need people to do things. I mean, what are they gonna do with all these empty buildings? They can't all be tech businesses.
They gotta be torn down.
Yeah, well, they
You
should,
need parks.
yeah, they should be. All
They'll
right,
end up homeless shelters.
yeah, well, that's,
Illegal, yeah.
yeah,
Well, I'm hooking into what you just said about the future is small communities is kind of maybe a revelation, because that kind of informs how to tell our story for the future.
well,
I
it's
think.
very true. I mean, we were a community, we are a community still, but we're a different kind of community. Small communities are generally somewhere around 60 people.
And they're
And-
organic.
And yeah, well, they can be lots of different things. The farm was a community with a purpose and a leader.
Mhm.
And every community needs a strong leader that the people will then agree. And it needs to be an agreement amongst at least a majority of the people on how they're going to proceed to whatever goal. If it's just survival, that's a goal.
Yeah.
And so,
Well, it sure was easier to live under a dictator, because
Well-
you know, you just follow orders and you're happy at the end of the day.
well, Michael was not a dictator, that's for sure.
Well,
He was a king.
Yeah.
And there's a difference. And actually, so Michael is a real person. He's not a myth.
Yeah.
I mean, I know I talked to him probably more than anybody about building projects and so on, and it really is a consensus, and he always was concerned about doing the right thing. He had some limitations of electricity, well, and plumbing and actually being patient. Where
Well, those are significant.
those were significant.
Mm.
But it was really fun to watch him work, I'll tell you. You know, in the early years, we worked down in a little shop and he had these buckets of stuff. And every time you needed something, he'd dump the buckets on the floor and go through them. And organization wasn't his strong feat, but getting up and doing a yard of concrete every day was his strength. And the person that does that has something at the end of the day.
Yeah.
That's what's important. Every day, if you do something, then you've accomplished something. If you talk about it and worry about it, then you don't get it done.
But what drove him was waste not, want not. So he wouldn't get rid of anything. And that's probably.
It would
what
take
he
me a
thought.
month of thinking and talking to figure out what drove Michael, but the reality is, well, in the beginning, I think you were part of that story, going to the dump and getting stuff when he was very young.
Oh, yeah.
And,
yeah.
and so that was his MO,
Resource.
his modus operation. That's how he thought about things. And that was possible in the 50s and 60s. It's not possible today. If you go to a dump, it's totally toxic
Mm.
and there's probably nothing
It
of
was
real.
toxic then, we were just fortunate.
Yeah,
Right.
we lucked out.
Well, those were the happy years. That's why we looked out. That's what I'm saying is those years were easy. These years are not. And you have to be smarter and you have to have a real plan. and you have to be smart about it, and you have to have good leadership. I mean, all of those things, and it is about management. Once you get underway, Michael did wear his body out, and he did damage his eyes because he was impatient.
Yeah.
And that's a sadness, and I'm angry with him about that because he's not sitting out there now
Mhm.
being part of this conversation. And then he chose not to try and get well,
Right.
but that was partly his personality maybe, but mostly it was because he didn't want to come back to the farm. I mean, if I ever sell the junction, I'm leaving St. John, I'm not going back. That's it, I'm over. Because I don't want to see what goes forward. And, but Michael was wiser than all of us. He gave it to the Historic Society, and it was a challenge to get them to accept it.
Oh, sure it was.
But now we need to nurture as much as we can to figure out how we can create within the group that's responsible for the farm an ability to move forward successfully. I'd probably love to come here if you get prepared. I'd even try and bring some of my crew and we'd take 2 weeks and clean the farm up. I mean, there's so much stuff that has no meaning. Get rid of it. It clutters the farm. You need to get the stuff that's really important and was part of the groups that went out and got the windmill, how we got the tanks, how we got the motors. Those are the important issues. All the junk that's been collected because people bring it here is meaningless. It doesn't have any meaning on the farm. Get it out of here. And you can make the farm more beautiful because aesthetics is important too. And
Simplify the
it-
message.
it simplified the message. That's the best term for it. It is making the message clearer for people to understand. And then somebody needs to write the tours. They need to be honest because they're better than the myths. The myths have no meaning to people. I can be a magic person and think about how I can solve all the world's problems, but that doesn't solve the world's problems. I can think it in my head, but unless I have a plan and can make that plan work, it will not work. But there are so many funny things that happened that it's hard to even get your arms around it. I mean, every piece of equipment here had a funny moment. You know, that's the story.
Do we have a chronological timeline of, because I was talking to Hans on the phone on the way down here.
Yeah,
And I was sort of correcting him on what came before what.
that would be
I
a
said bottle
nightmare.
house was first,
No,
then
that's
then the workshop.
That would be really hard. It's even hard in my head, partly because those early years, we were all gone. Michael was gone for periods of time. Dorothy was really the queen of the farm during that period.
Yep,
And,
it had some really good parties.
The-
Yeah,
the
well,
side story. yeah.
actually, so Dorothy was really nice to me. And actually, Skipper, your parents were great. Your parents and you just lifted me to another world, which I'm internally grateful for. And then I landed on the farm, which I'm internally grateful for. I was lucky to be someone who was from a poor family and timid and afraid. And all of this helped me be different. And I appreciate that. The farm helped me be so much stronger. You realize you can really do things. And I wasn't being a carpenter or a plumber or anything. I was being a heavy lifter and part of a bunch of people doing something. And in the end, it got done. And then that was wonderful. We all felt good.
Did Michael have the visions or did you have the visions?
Well, there's different visions on the farm. The first time I got brave enough to ask Michael if I could really take and do something different was in the treehouse. And Michael said, oh, yes. And Dwayne was going to live in there. And we tore all the walls out in a day. And Michael came in here. He was all flipped out. I said, Michael, it's okay. We're going to make it work. You know, it's hard to say what a vision is. I had probably the greatest part of the castle is when Michael and I built that. And he's written to me, I've got 3 or 4 letters that describe how that changed his attitude about what could be done. Bringing the motors in here and doing all this stuff, was only about collecting stuff. That was a real project that was built. You know, I did this room when we had to move from the other kitchen. To me, this is my greatest success because I do have pictures of us being in this room. This was a magic room for all of us. This table was magic.
The center of.
You
the-
know, this table is golden to the farm. All of us used it. When groups got together, we were in here, the fire was here every night.
And we were choking on the smoke.
It never got really fixed, but that was okay. That's the farm. And it never slowed anybody down. And Michael would always fall asleep somewhere.
But I was you were the architect, Skipper was the engineer, and Michael was the king, yeah.
Michael was the king. He's the one that made it happen. And it wasn't an easy job, you know, I mean, he was serious about people on the farm. He kicked lots of people off the farm that weren't being good farm hands. Not a lot, because he didn't let a lot in.
Some people just aren't hard workers.
Yeah. Well,
particularly
well,
now.
Dwayne was one of the greatest violators of putting tools back, but Michael kept him around. He was a good person. And Dwayne was very wonderful to Michael when he got ill. He put a lot of love and energy
Oh,
into
yeah.
Michael.
Well, part of Michael's lasting another 2 years was because of
Yeah, I know.
Dwayne's attention.
I know,
Dwayne
well-
and I used to walk him down the street.
Yeah. I would like to be involved in trying to think about how to put a plan together. This is a wonderful book. It's very simple. It's very straightforward. It's plain language. It's easy to understand. But it's going to take an administrator, actually a manager, somebody. You need to rethink your structure of how it's going to work. And it's going to take some money. And the only way you can get money is by making a total plan, trying to figure out who's going to fill those if you can, and then put your story together and start writing grants. Because there is a very important future message here if we can put it together the right way. You can always help yourself. And even doing silly projects like this can bring happiness and joy. It just has to be scaled different ways in different places. Homeless people, if they could be organized, many of those people would like to work if they could, but if they could work on a project that would become theirs, it would make a difference. But somebody would have to organize it, somebody would have to finance it. And the trouble with our leadership today is they've gotten to be leaders only through being popular, not through being technically capable or good managers.
Right.
Obviously, nothing's being managed well in America today at every level. We're all on our own, you know, and a community of 60 is a good start. If you get the right 60 people, you can create and do a lot of things.
I would like to say that the idea of Michael the myth versus Michael the maker is very compelling. I completely agree with that. It's good to have input from you all while you're here, but you all will not be here all the time. We need to have your stories. We need to have your facts. We need to have your photos, your letters, all the documents so that we have an archive, because the only way the truth of this is going to be maintained is if we have access to it and scholars are allowed to access it. And so that's really what's important. It's, I wouldn't say more important than the structure. The structure is what draws everybody here to hear about Michael. So
Right.
if we want people to hear about Michael Rubel and not King Michael, then we need the archives. We need the letters, we need the books, the oral histories.
It is
We need
true.
it down
Well,
to-
I probably have at least 100 letters. And Michael's letters, the people who get Michael's letters, they're interesting, but they always have content. You can tell why he wrote that letter. I got a couple here. I'll bring some. I've got them. I don't think I have them here, but I have them at the hotel. I'll bring some and show you.
I'll give a contemporary anecdote that Scott recently acquired these scrapbooks that were unknown to us, and he's going through and scanning them, and while he's scanning them, he's telling me about them. And my response is, it's more important you write down what were in the photos than that you scan them. Because because we have the photos are in the photo album, but we need to know what the photos mean. Digital copy doesn't mean anything if we don't know who's in that and why that was there, and what's the significance of the parallel between Michael Rubel's dress and Ostadi's dress, and how he was a huge mentor to him. You know, those kinds of things are not things that are.
Yeah, well, you know, the pictures I showed you of Michael cutting all that, I mean, that was real work. And he did it, and it's right there. You can see him do it. It is true. You know, something we haven't talked about, Michael, I can't even remember the year, you know, sent me tickets to come to the big celebration he was doing, where we all got in buses and drove down and got out and got on other buses. Here were all these wonderful people that were early on in the farm, and he took us way down the road to
Oh, the sycamore.
Sycamore Inn, yeah. We had dinner and all on Michael.
He didn't just take us there, he took us on a wild ride.
On a wild
Yes,
ride.
he did.
And
So-
then he put us out, and we were standing. Bus loads of people standing on their avenue going, what's gonna happen? And they left.
Yeah, those buses left and other
And
buses.
then a little while later, they came back and picked us up. And then we drove through McDonald's and, no, all kinds of crazy, yeah.
That was the real Michael. I totally agree with you. That story, it is really hard. You know, we're all people. That's why in the beginning, I didn't, you know, I talked about John went all the way through and had a good career and did nice things, had kids and a wife, and Michael and I were here on the farm trying to figure out who we were for a long time. And 9 years basically before we really got our act together. And Skipper was bumping along through school and finally did get there and then became an engineer and had a career. But he came back often. I did come back quite a bit in the early years because I traveled 2 or 3 times. It would be nice to be able to get new material, treat it properly, and then try and put it together reasonably close to what's there to restore it. I mean, they've been there a long time. They've lasted a long time. Actually, there's probably been more houses torn down of the same age and new ones built in this time frame. So you got to understand, we're a temporary world, and to be able to restore something like it was done originally, that's a nice idea. There's probably a few things I wouldn't do the same, but visually, after all, the castle is really the main element. I do believe the windmill is also a main element.
Yes.
The buildings are just buildings, and they can all be fixed close to the same, and they're not a problem. The packing house should be totally preserved, and you need to have more safety devices to make sure it doesn't have a problem. But I mean, I think there is a logical way you can go through it, and you know, again, they did a wonderful job. It's easy to understand. You can make a plan. It's just overwhelming. And in fact, it's a 10-year project. And all of us, well, no, not all of us, some of us will be gone in 10 years. So, yes.
I'd like to point out, one of the things that you said earlier is about water being the main issue for Long Beach Junction and Wellington Castle. And that is, and I really do appreciate all your input because most of it is very much paralleled in that report, and it makes sense because you're an architect and this was done by architects as well. Water being the primary issue that we need to deal with because roofs are leaking, the drainage system in the castle is causing the ground to soften, making the towers a little funky and sinking, and that has been identified as the primary thing that needs to be fixed first. We need to make sure we can evacuate all the water, especially with all the atmospheric rivers we're having. We have to acknowledge the climate is affecting this. And so we have a person on the board that we brought in who's doing grant writing, and we've applied for grants, and those grants are going towards water mitigation. And we did have a grant that we applied for and we didn't get it this time. But it was also a matching grant, you know, it was 150,000 and then a matching grant. So we get the 150, but we have to raise 150. So there's a real need for farmhands, for anyone who cares about the castle to support what we're doing. And we're doing what you're saying you want done, and we need the backing. So we need support, we need good word of mouth, we need reality about the projects. And we need care for the castle and we need monetary support. So donations, requests, an endowment, we see like an endowment for the castle that's specifically for the castle, not for the Glendora Historical Society, but for the
Yes.
castle.
Right.
Because the castle generates the most enthusiasm and the most income for the society, but the funding is not primarily towards the castle, so we'd like to see monetary support, and we'd like to see it appropriately designated for castle preservation.
Right, well, there again, I think, so let's take the water, for instance, because water is a real problem for me too. I actually have a river coming through the middle of the junction. That's not so much of a problem. It's my roofs primarily, and then drainage within the junction itself. And I'm really pretty close to solving it. So when I walked around the other day and looked at that, there is a relatively easy solution, but it would have to be approved because it would change some of the dynamics in the reservoir. So the problem is it is settling and there's water coming in everywhere. There is a simple solution to that. You go back and resurface the whole floor, and that can be done. They have concrete that you can pour in there that actually you can control, and you figure out where you're going to take the water out. Actually, the easiest way, if you want to really make it work, just, and we've done it before, put a hole down, put a big tank in there, put a pump in there, because you can pump water out really fast, and pump it somewhere else. Just make the whole floor go to that area and cast a whole new floor in there. That would be the very simplest solution. And it would actually solve some other solutions around all the perimeters of the buildings. And you do need to make sure that you're grading even inside the building. So every water that gets inside that has to flow to, it could be 1 or 2 or even 3 points in there. You just have to get a surveyor in there and do all your elevations and figure out which 3 directions you're going to move the water, and drop them in tanks and pump them out of there.
Well, 3 years ago, we put a plumb bob on the tower, clock tower.
Yeah,
Has anyone been measuring what it's doing?
I can see
we
it's,
measured
How much is it?
There, I don't have that data because I'm not involved in that. The council would be involved.
Barrett Manning has looks at that measurement.
But yeah, it's regularly monitored. Sandy has set up hydro thermometers so we can measure density, coolness, moisture in different areas in the Tin Palace, the Bennett Room. You know, we're doing a lot of data collecting to see how the environment is affecting. You know, there's a lot of work constantly going on, and a lot of it is not visual. It's planning, it's organizing, it's documenting, it's collecting, it's, yeah, as I mean, with many histories as we can, trying to get farmhands to do oral histories and gathering that information and putting it somewhere central where it can be accessed and reviewed, so that decisions on collection items.
I do totally agree with you. That's partly why the story gets important. How do you construct that so it makes sense? I mean, it's easy to see what needs to be done, and there are many reasonable solutions. That one actually is one of the easiest. Your roofs, auxiliary buildings can be re-roofed. It's not a big expense. What you need to do is the character needs to remain the same. It doesn't have to be done exactly the same way, and in many cases you won't want to. You need to go clean up everything that doesn't have any meaning that's related to plumbing or electrical. Anything that doesn't work anymore, get rid of it, because it's just confusing. It's the character you want to maintain. It's the story you want to move forward. And in fact, my advice on cutting down the trees is we didn't have them originally. It has changed the character of the property. If you really want to talk about change, that's a change that wasn't here.
Well, you had the big oak trees now.
Yeah, the oak trees, they were
Didn't
there.
have the rubber trees.
Well, the rubber trees he planted, they should go because they are dangerous.
They're-
Michael was
they're
gonna cut them
very
down several
invasive.
times, but he,
They're-
you
they're
know,
also
the-
about to get into that.
so the one advantage of trees is they give you lots of shade, which keeps the heat off your buildings. And it's just a trade-off. The trouble is the maintenance of the trees is much greater. You can do things to mitigate the heat on your buildings. And anyway, if you do new galvanized and you paint things properly, it's not gonna damage them. Just,
Speaking of story, as a docent, I'm probably a perpetuator of myths, so. I mean, not that I'm aware of it, from your perspective, what were the big myths that you heard? I mean, you don't have to go through all of them.
well,
Um,
so one of the myths I heard today, which is really wrong, is how Michael, came by the farm. It was donated to the Unitarian or the church,
Right.
and then they were able to buy it from the church.
That's good. That's how we tell it.
Well, it was told differently today.
Well, how does Macy tell it?
Well, he was 17 years old and he went and asked for it and it was given to him.
Really?
Yeah.
Macy
He makes things up. Well, and that doesn't, that, the real truth is correct and there's nothing wrong with it.
Right.
And it's really,
Tell
what's
us
good
about
about what happened is Michael's fantasy and dream. And I know if I'd have been his age, 20 years old, and had that responsibility of taking this property on, I'd have been thrilled.
Yeah.
So, and Michael obviously was thrilled. Was he up to it? No, it took him about 9 years to figure all that out. So you gotta add that up, it's part of the story. He had to go do his donkey trip. Why did he do that when he had this wonderful place to work on? And he went sailing with the captain. He did skip tracing. He in the end drove a bus. Why did he drive a bus? Because he loved it. And it,
Well,
he-
also, he used a bus, carry bottles of.
And pipes. I love telling third graders how third graders built the
Yeah,
castle.
yeah, they did. No, well, that's the truth, and that's wonderful. Yes, I know that. I always, all these chairs we're sitting in came on the bus.
Yeah.
So, what the heck? It's, and some of the characters that aren't here, Ted Shepard isn't here, and Chris, his brother. It was interesting when the two of them got together because it was a real scream. There's 2 bullet holes in the roof of Michael's second refrigerator that he fired, and I was here at the time, so it was pretty interesting.
I didn't know that.
Well, they were giving Michael a bad time. He wanted to go to bed. He was tired. They'd all been drinking too much.
Okay.
And they kept bothering him. And so he grabbed his 22 and bam, bam, and they came running out of there.
I remember him tear gassing a whole group of kids up in the north refrigerator.
Yeah.
He just, I saw it. He went, they wouldn't leave, and he just went up there. I saw him outside the door, and he just aimed his tear gas gun into the room and fired a bunch of rounds. And they all came stumbling out and coughing in tears.
Well, there's lots of stories. When Michael got the truck out with the creosote, we all had to run for our lives.
Well, I think it probably helped kill him prematurely, too.
It was the welding and the
Yeah.
heavy lifting that did him
Yes.
in.
He wouldn't put on that mask.
Yeah, I know. Sandy has a very good point, and we all need to help her figure out how to put the story together. Every individual person who was on the farm during that age should be trying to put together their thoughts about the Michael and how the farm was important to them. Because that's the real story. How many of us went away as happier, better people?
Well, I think we all did.
We all
Yeah,
did, but
but-
you gotta write the story down. You
Yeah.
can't just say that's what happened to you.
But-
You really gotta say why
Yeah.
that was important. We are selling the story of Michael. Hugh Hauser obviously did the best job of anybody cataloging the farm. He was a great storyteller, and he was able to get great stories out of the people he interviewed. And Michael is always a good interview, but I think with Hugh Hauser, he was the most honest I've
Yeah.
ever seen him
Yeah.
in an interview. And that's what it's all about. Just those interviews should be enough selling points to make it happen, because
Right.
His foundation, Hugh Hauser's foundation may be,
there's a lot of rich Glendorans. I can see them on the hillsides. We're not talking about a lot of money for those people. A
Yeah.
couple $1 million. I mean, we got somebody just to donate $1 million for a playground on St. John. It should have cost 200,000, but it cost us $1 million, so that's what he gave. But we had to have a good story, and we did. I mean, the kids are really using it, and now we just have the evidence. There they are. They're having a great time. It's not only the kids, it's the 18 and 19-year-olds too. a playground. They've never had that in their life on St. John.
Well, and part of the problem for the future is systemic because of just the nature, the setup of a society. Like running this place with a king worked, and running it by committee is just
Well, no.
everything that Michael did in 5 minutes takes us 6 months.
I already said, you gotta have a queen now,
Well,
because that's
yeah.
what the next is, but you can structure that well enough, so the problem is you gotta have the money in the bank.
Yeah,
Then the person has the ability to make decisions and move forward, and as long as you do, this is a plan, it works, you check off the ones you're gonna do and you go do them. That's it. It can work, but
But
it
it's-
takes somebody to organize it, and it takes a couple managers working with her. And you've got to pick the manager that understands the project you're working on.
yeah. This
Um,
feels funny putting our story in the hands, basically it's a castle run by a corporation now.
I don't see any corporation. in it. We can be the runners, you know?
Speak about the system, and I think like committee is not a bad thing because you have multiple voices with different perspectives. As we're talking about, the history of the castle is not one voice, it's many stories.
That's good.
And so I don't think a committee is the issue. I think the issue is that there's a philosophical difference that has been permeated in this historical society. We're finally turning a curve on that, but there's people that are for the castle, and then there's people that are for the museum, and then there's people that are for everything. But because it gets this entrenched idea of the castle showing up in the museum, or the museum is not being paid attention to, that sort of schism has been
How
a
much of the
problem,
money raised by the castle go to the museum?
right?
Why doesn't the museum move here? I mean, this was the whole idea Michael had.
Well, no, the museum is fine. I love that little museum, and you know,
Good, too.
again, it's two different goals. The problem is there needs to be a definition that does work, and you may still have to work that out. The castle could stand on its own, and if we figured out how to do that, and that's probably the best solution in the long run, but that's a change of ownership to really truly make that happen. That's why the world doesn't work. There is no reason why you can't be compatible and have conversations.
Yeah.
That's what it should be, because the right hand shakes the left hand. You guys can work
No,
it
they
out.
don't need
You'll
to talk
both
to
bring
each other to
strengths and
work.
you both have needs. So it's always a people thing. That's where Michael was magical. The people thing always worked, you know?
He had kind of a very special wit about him, and kind
Well-
of conned you into helping him.
Mark Twain wrote about a character like that. He could get everybody to follow him.
My point of me bringing that up is that there was not an understanding of preservation, and then there's a not understanding the significance of this place. And some of it is by people who built it, who humbly don't think what they did was that important, but it is. And then there's other people who think this place is a pile of junk, and they don't care. And that's fine. Not everybody has to be on the same opinion, but the castle needs to be able to shine as it can, and it needs to be supported as it can. I don't think it has to be in opposition to the museum, but it definitely needs to have its funding designated. So there's no confusion, and that there's more autonomy in making decisions and being able to follow a practical preservation-minded path.
I believe that you solve these problems as best you can, but at the same time, I think you can improve the farm. And I know some of the young people I've met here are proud of what they've done, and that's wonderful. I appreciate that. That's what gets people motivated. It makes them better people as they grow older. What needs to happen is someone can guide them on that, keep it within the character of the farm. The farm, it is a piece of junk. That's what it is, but it's put together in a very interesting way, and it has a story, but it could have a better story that was more appealing to the people who think it's junk. It isn't, it is junk. It's interesting. It was wonderful to build, and we can still do more. There's still improvements. There are still things that could be done that Michael would smile about. And I would like to replace some of the stuff that was nicer that was replaced that isn't as nice.
And the report does have room for rehabilitation.
Yeah.
Which is like.
I mean, you still got a lot of land. If I had this much land with mongoose, I'd be building right now. I only have 1/3 of an acre and I've stacked a lot on it.
So Glenn, there was a period of time between when Michael donated the farm to the Historical Society and maybe 3 or 4 years ago where the oversight that was provided for the castle was given by people who or their own homeowners, had their own vision for things, had a connection with Boy Scouts, so they let the Boy Scouts do projects, things like that. There was no oversight from a preservation and preserving Michael's aesthetic
Right,
to the things that were done, and that changed 2 or 3 years ago.
yeah,
So we haven't destroyed, we're busy fixing water tanks, things that really need fixing
Right.
right now. And so I hear what you're saying, and that is a phase of the farm that we were able to get through, thank God. And so now people understand why we need to preserve Michael's aesthetic
right.
before we put anything new or change anything.
And, there again, it's a plan. And there's so many parts to it. This is magic. I think they did a great job. You've got that plan, but that's the preservation plan. At the same time, you've got right now, everything you're doing at the moment, that has to be done. And what you did today is interesting and you were successful, so you're happy now. And it could have fallen on your head, but it didn't. And you just have to, unfortunately, you have to get up and do that every day on the farm. If you have a plan where you start checking them off, pretty soon, you've got a pretty big pile of accomplishments. And then you do have to tackle a big one. You need to tackle the water. I have no doubt that's the most important thing to
We're
do.
trying to get funded.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's where
So,
we go.
yeah.
Funding.
Yeah.
So, and we're writing grants. and
Yeah.
We're asking for year-end asks and
Right.
and very articulate letters sent out, which
Yes, get the grant written. I do think the grant writing. So try for 150. And I told you the other day, I'd write the matching check for 150. Not an issue, but the plan has to be there. I have to believe it and I have to understand it. And it's definitely worth doing. We've talked a lot about it. So not somebody has to do it. So that's the issue. It's going to fall on her shoulders probably to organize it and put it together. And we all have to help what we can. I understood many years ago, this was probably going to happen, but I didn't understand how it was going to happen or who was going to be involved with it happen. So now here we are. And I'm very impressed with the tour I had yesterday and talking to everybody. It's still really valuable, but that's just for me, what I'm speaking, but I know it can be valuable for other people. It really can. It is magical. It just needs to be cleaned up a lot. Michael would have had it cleaner.
Right.
He really would have. You need to solve the structural problem because every time you put a Band-Aid on it, then you have to put a bigger one the next time, and then it's over here somewhere not working. It's like whack-a-mole. I live that nightmare too. There are good solutions to this. It just takes an awful lot of energy and work, and whoever's doing that should get paid. It's a real job, and it's a tough one.
I would like to point out that the residents of the castle fund the majority of the historical society through our rents. We are the majority volunteers. We're the majority bringing other volunteers in. We are the ones putting out fires. Joe is doing the electrical. We have, peripheral non-residents who are honorary residents. We do a lot of work. We are not retired. We did not have government engineering jobs. We are Gen X. We were defunded. We didn't have art classes in the 70s.
I
We
know.
don't have retirement funds. We
I know all of that. I know, what, so,
No, I know. I'm giving everyone here the background. I
Right.
know you get it. I'm trying to localize.
well,
So
so
much work done here.
my solution to the people around me, unfortunately, I've been doing it long enough. I mean, the people who've worked for me many years, they all own their own homes because my wife and I loaned them money and made it happen. And that's a retirement. It truly is on St. John. And it's too bad. If this was mine, I would put people in every house and give them a choice. If they really helped out and made it work, that house would become theirs when I'm gone and then they can deal with it. We are broken today. Everybody should have good health care, good education, and a pension. It doesn't happen. The only thing I can say is if we were successful making the farm work, at least there'd be a lot of happiness.
Yeah.
I know it's hard to hear that from me because I went down and became successful and made money, but I am willing to use some of that money on the farm, because I owe it to it. The farm is what made me successful in the long run. If I live 4 or 5 more years and then leave you some money, you'll have enough, I guarantee it. So I'm too stingy. I still want to do things and it takes money.
I mean, the whole reason we keep doing this is because we think there's a way for this to be relevant in the future.
Well-
And what you did with your people, Michael did with all the houses he owned, he had rent to buy programs and he helped people
Right.
become home.
But he should have been a little wiser to save some of that to be used today.
Yeah, he didn't have anything left.
I know. Well, if you do it, you have to take the joy in it and hope for the
Yeah.
best. I mean, that's a terrible thing to say, but for all of us who've lived on the farm and been here, we're greatly rewarded. That's for sure. And their lives have been successful. And they have a big part of that life that was joyful on the farm. That's a blessing that all of us who were here can enjoy. The people that are trying to do this journey don't have that clear a future, and they can't even enjoy doing all the research about Michael. Got to be a nightmare. I guarantee it. There's no way to tackle all of the things that probably should be known and said versus all the things that shouldn't be known and said.
Particularly
Yeah,
those.
So we got to give a lot of credit to the people who are here living in this facility. They need a better deal. I haven't asked what the rents are. I will probably try and understand, but that's a lousy way to try and do it. It would be wonderful if they could all become skilled and do work on the farm and not have to pay rent. Because then the farm would be part of who they are and they would learn to love it and enjoy it. I mean, basically, I paid $15 a month. Don't tell them, but that's what it was forever. That's what it started at. That's what it was.
Charging me 25.
Yeah. He should have charged all you
Didn't
guys
want
more
to.
when you left because I did all the work to fix it. So anyway,
I think all that on behalf of the residents, we love being here, we love helping, and we love giving up time. We just want to be respected. And I know, and I'm saying it because I know you understand that, and I feel like I can confidently express.
well, I really do. And I just know how hard it is and I'm lucky. I really love my employees. I have a lot of them. I've kept them for a long time. And I can be here. I've got somebody running our shop that's better than either me or my wife. She does a better job. And that's wonderful.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. We set it up, we got it running well, and she's just making it better. I got three people that are second generation St. Johnnians running shops. Their mothers worked at Mongoose. Those are wonderful things. It's a community. We all know each other. We know our history. We're nice to each other. And when we get in trouble with hurricanes, we all help each other. That was the life on the farm. And that should be the life today on the farm. That's what the farm's supposed to be about. So I'll talk to you later about what we can do about that, but I don't know. I was very unhappy 3 or 4 years ago. I was just angry about everything. The world is falling apart. Our leaders are so terrible. We kill people everywhere. That's our MO in America. But I started reading, and the more I read, really good people. There's a lot of smart people out there. They know what's happening. They know why it's happening. It's not my fault. It's not your fault. It's not any of our faults in here. But we need to pick ourselves up and make ourselves happy. I got happy because I stopped worrying about it all. There's nothing I could do about it. But I can do something about this.
Yeah.
Everybody can. If we could make it live on, then other people in the future at some point will be amazed when, everything else falls apart and this is still standing. So, well,
Everything Alborn did was done pretty well.
yeah, well, these buildings are really old. And,
Yeah.
they're still here and Michael was a good custodian. He'd never let them burn down, but he worried about it every damn day.
Yeah.
It's hard to understand how much Michael did worry. He wasn't just a clown.
Yeah.
He was a very serious person and he cared a lot, and he cared a lot about us. He cared a lot about me, I know.
I have a good story about Mike. You may remember I was a little antagonistic, anxious.
Oh, really?
yeah.
I knew you were.
And it bothered Michael that I would be uh, bothering everyone at his parties because I was in everybody's everything. And so he worked out a signaling system for me. And he says, you know, when you start being obnoxious, this. And so I had no idea. It's just the way I was. And pretty soon, you know, I'd be having a good time and Mike will be going, oh, is this obnoxious? Okay. So I had to take the signals from Michael that I was being obnoxious. And then I started to understand what he was referring to that was obnoxious. And then I started catching myself, you know, being obnoxious. He wouldn't have to tug at his ear so hard. He cared about us,
You did.
you know,
really did.
and he was a psychologist. I don't think he realized it, but that was his magic, is he just understood people.
Speaking of parties, I've always wondered how it works as a resident and then also with the number of bathrooms, because even now we don't have any bathrooms. So how does that work?
There's a yellow tree, oh, yellow tree's gone.
But didn't you guys have parties with like hundreds?
Oh, yeah, we always had enough
Where,
bathrooms.
where?
They're
On that
up
tree
there and
behind
right
that
there
bush?
and down there.
Bathrooms were different many years ago. We weren't attached to them so much. You know, it's, and modern bathrooms, you see, they're all exactly the same. They're bigger than most houses.
Yeah.
Yeah, we live in a beautiful home and it's wonderful. But our kitchen, I only have to do about 3 steps in the morning to get my coffee and my cereal. And some kitchens I see, you have to walk 6 feet each way. And, you know, it's just, we live in 2 big houses. And we could all live in smaller houses and have better lives.
But the modern great room, kitchen, living room is inspired right here.
Well, this was a social space and it had a kitchen attached to it. But other than that, there's no way this would be confused for a modern house. This is a wonderful space with lots of interesting things. You could be locked up in here for 3 days and not see it all. So, you know, that's the difference. The farm is a joy to experience. And if you built some of it, it's even a greater experience. I told somebody today why there's always a mark down the middle of all these boards. Why is that?
Because the saw blade is only,
Well, I used my
Right.
shop down there to cut all these. And it was a radial arm saw, the most dangerous saw in the world. Unfortunately, they don't really make them anymore. We use chop boxes, they're much safer.
yeah.
But a chop box would cut through that, mine would, but that one I had to flip over and cut, so every
Yeah.
time I did, I never got it cut quite in the same space, so every one of these boards, if you look at them,
Well, I thought you were more
has a
of a
line.
perfectionist. And
You know what? We worked very fast. This went up very quickly,
Yeah.
and I'm not really, this I would call perfect, because it's interesting.
Yeah.
So,
I'm surprised you put your initials in the top.
no, we never had to. Those of us who live here knew who did what. And we all did everything. Everything that was done had everyone's fingerprints on it. This table, these chairs. Everybody had a contribution.
You can see my handprints in the concrete.
Yeah, there you go.
And when we give tours, we also try to give credit to those who did things. So I talk about you actually at
Well-
different places on the tour.
Yeah.
All right, well, I do appreciate that. And it is with so many people. I think the tours could be largely improved by a collective of all the people of us who lived here, looking over them and putting their footnotes in it. That would,
I would love that.
yeah, that
I
would,
think we need
and
a
actually,
timeline that we can.
well,
could-
timeline would be wonderful to be able, I don't know how anybody can put that together, because it is so chaotic.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is, especially the first 9 years, because I was gone to school and in the army, and Skipper was gone, and Michael was
Attach it to a
gone.
timeline.
So anyway, all of those things would have to be kind of sorted out. there is a lot to do and a lot to write down. That is a real chore for Sandy, and it's a real chore to put the story together, but we all could help a little by trying to give her information, because I know I've seen the files in there she's trying to work on, and to get the stories correct and all the stuff that was collected, which is very chaotic. Michael, of course, just, and I do have almost 100 letters. Interesting enough, they all have information in it. So anyway, I've had a good time these couple of days, and we still have another day and then another day for me, and I'm hoping to spend with Sandy. So
Good.
there is, I can see her great value, and actually everyone who was here yesterday, I could tell how rich this environment still is.
Mhm.
It's still a very wonderful environment.
Well, we're lucky to have the residents we have right now.
We always had interesting residents.